Okay, so just to confirm again, like the plan. So I've already started my Pinterest reference board for my costume design. The base idea of the driver is that it's going to be a, what do you call it? An exo environmental suit. So my driver is going to wear that. It's kind of a loose fitting environmental suit. So in some sense, like the reference is something like that, where you kind of get that puffy sleeves and everything, but with a mix of certain ribbed elements. So I'm definitely going for that. I'm gonna also try and implement a lot of these very classic early NASA suits, which are very, very nice, and they look like knights. So I think that's pretty cool. I also want to implement something I'm kind of always a favorite of, which is older atmospheric diving suits. So some shoulder pad details are going to have that elements and things like that. Very, very nice reference. And we're not going to design the bike today because it's just not enough time, but that'll be something that I'll probably build in 3D as well, as opposed to drawing it from scratch. And this is an interesting photo. Yeah. So I accidentally went into like a new, I think it's a sexual fetish, I'm not sure, but it's a series of men and men in like biker gear. And it's very specific to like racing biker gear with the zip at the back. It's interesting, yeah. But the cool thing is, like, it's actually like really form-fitting and is a very nice reference. So, I mean, it's great. And look at the helmet; like, it's actually a really nice design. So, yeah, it's like it works, really works. Like, so that's something. Yeah, and I didn't know that was a thing. Now I know, which is good. So I'm getting smarter as well. But yeah, so we're gonna, I've already used pin down, so pin down to kind of download everything. So it should be up in my downloads. The project is just codename HM or Happy first, because I never really told you what was the whole premise of the film, and I doubt you'll understand my storyboard. It's pretty messy, but it'll be a secret, so it's fine. So I'm gonna start designing this suit, and like I said before, I have my Sketchfab pose reference. I think this is a really good, nice gesture. I'm not gonna take much of anything on the texture wise because it's someone else's design, but I do really like the pose. I think it's shows the gesture and the gesture and the body size quite well, actually. I think it's almost everything that I wanted. So I'm gonna switch off post-processing because sometimes, you know, there's a lot of effects on it which I don't want. I have a choice of just taking the base color, but I think I like it with a little bit of lighting, and I'm probably not gonna use much of the texture itself, but it's just a habit to get a nice screenshot. This will make my life very easy in terms of like starting the painting. Okay, so I'm going to make a fairly large canvas because this is a production concept. So I just want to remind you about like just good habits for file sizes. Low resolution is fine, but you want to keep your pixel density pretty high, like 4,000, 3,000. It's a good number. If your PC can handle higher, like 8 to 10,000, that's even better. Because your texture brushes, everything looks better. When your file is more denser in pixel, even when your painting is rough, it doesn't look pixelated because it's actually catching all of that brush stroke. So it ends up still printing quite well. So And if you're the kind of artist that keeps your layers quite minimal, it shouldn't slow down your computer too much. And most of you are using like MacBooks and things like that. I'm pretty sure it can handle it quite decently. Okay, so I'm gonna just cut this guy out. Actually, do you mind if I just take a quick photo of the sketch? I can't remember what the design is. Yeah, and I'll just email it to myself now. Sorry. I just want to make sure I don't lose, because a lot of times if you don't have your sketch in hand, what will happen is that your design would change at the end of the day, and that's never good. Yep, thank you. Okay, so let me just prep my wall, put all of this in. If you have PureRef, this is a good time to use it as well. This school PC doesn't have PureRef, but PureRef is a free app. Essentially, you can just, once you drop all of your references into the software, it'll just arrange everything nicely for you into one square. Right, so it's great to make a mood board and things like that. It's relatively small. You just, I mean, donate, or if you're poor students, you just put 0 and then you just download. And you pay them back when you're successful later. Don't know if I can just install it. It's okay. Never mind. We'll do it manually. Yeah, I can't. So for now, we'll just do it manually like this. So, fair warning, I will be photo bashing even like portions of the 3D work, just for the sake of speed. I do plan to recreate this in 3D anyway, because this concept art is just a design reference for actual 3D short film. So regardless, I'm going to bring this into ZBrush or whatever and then just model out the entire character, so that I can give it to my friend to rig it, and then another friend to animate, and then we'll see how that goes, that kind of a thing. So this is my little knolling process, just gonna make sure everything that I need is in place. And then the most important ingredient is in my Gmail. Why is it taking so long? There we go. Okay, so I'm not gonna directly paint over my sketch, just because it's a totally different thing. Like when I draw a sketch, I'm not thinking about the quality of the drawing. I'm more concerned about what design elements I want to put in. So it's kind of normal for it to be a little bit maybe not so good as a concept, because I think it's too much to one side, blah blah blah, and then I don't think it will be useful for a 3D modeler. So I'm just gonna adjust it. So I'm going to do some reconstructive surgery on our mannequin, and let's see, what layer is this? Let's give it a surface blur first, soften out all the details. So my first order is to get a decent proportion match within my sketch and my base painting. So things like overall size of the shoulders, size of the waist, bone structure. Just want to get that right first before I proceed to any extra work. Because one thing I actually designed as well is this extremely lean and compressed torso. That's something I really want to do, because I want that super skinny body, almost to the point where it looks a little bit malnourished, but this very big puffy like space jacket around it. So I kind of want to go for that vibe, so I need to kind of really squeeze the body down quite a bit. And then the boots are very like Yoji Shinkawa kind of design-esque, which I like. So it has that slight like running shoe kind of form to it, like a very sleek running shoe form. So I just want to get that silhouette working. I'm not really caring about any of the texture at the moment, honestly. The only thing I just want to preserve is just try at least get like the perspective overall to sit right, so I don't have to redo so much of it. But really what I want is just the overall form and silhouette. That's not too bad. So the Yoji Shinkawa boots that I was mentioning was let me show you. He designed some of like my favorite boots, very, very lovely shapes. So if you're not familiar with this person, obviously it's more like the lead designers for a lot of Hideo Kojima games and Metal Gear Solid, things like that. And most of the time, like, he's kind of famous for all of this kind of very loose brush work. But in actuality, like, his model sheets and his turnarounds are really, really precise, and I think that's kind of like one of the reasons why I love it. You kind of see just a very nice sleeve kind of wrapping around the shoes, almost like has like rubber look to it, and it just has a lot of good detail. So this is from MGS5, right? You can kind of see like how like the rubber just kind of wraps around it and protects the toes and the heel, and then the middle part is all canvas, and then you have this additional piece of leather that kind of wraps around the whole thing to tighten up the ankle. And I just really like that layering that he always puts into his shoes. So that's kind of like what I mean by that Shinkawa-esque shoe. I don't really need the color for this as well, so I'm just going to desaturate most of it and stick to a middle tone. And just a little bit more liquify. So it's interesting, right? Because like there's so little painting. Like I'm not really actually drawing or painting. I'm really just at this point what I'm focused about is just creating a very, very good foundation for me to start photo bashing. And I think that's one of the big reasons to why I see some student works fail at photo bashing, because I think maybe you jump into it too fast. Like photo bashing is really good, but it actually requires a little bit more planning. And actually digital art in general is like that. Like you can be really, really fast at it, but there's some things that just require it requires a little bit more planning ahead of time. And right now all of my effort is just to plan out my picture a little bit better by solving a lot of the bigger issues like pose and gesture and form. So I'm going to get rid of this gun, and I don't need that holster, and I don't need this pouch. So I think proportion wise we're quite close. I think the arms will be a little bit thicker. So first stage I think is done. Let's move on to the next, where we just start to clean up this silhouette a little bit further. And then try to get some of that main design cuts already established. So a design cut is something like that, where the core design visual parts are all laid out. So her design has this inner bodysuit, and I'm just gonna block that out very roughly, actually, just to kind of get some flat colors going on. So I'm not too concerned about cleanliness, it's more about clarity of where all the parts should be. I also honestly haven't decided on the color yet, so I'm just gonna make it up as I go, which is normally what I do anyway. I have a rough picture in my head. I feel she's gonna be right. She has to be like yellow orange. I forgot. That's actually part of the secret theme behind the costume design. Yeah, so she's gonna have some color on her costume. But since my base texture is this steampunk kind of pilot dude, so I'm just gonna keep the overall values there first. It'll just make my work a little bit easier to color correct it later. So you can see, like, it's just my brush is a round brush set to kind of 50% opacity, and I'm just blocking out overall forms. I'm still a big fan of like big puffy shoulders, like shoulder pads. I know it's a bit out of fashion these days, but you know, I grew up with like Warhammer 40k and all that kind of stuff, and so I'm a big fan of that stuff. StarCraft, well, StarCraft did kind of follow Warhammer, so. So I actually have notes in my sketchbook about potential materials and colors. So here I'm kind of suggesting I guess a polymer armor, might be orange or yellow, that kind of a thing. So I do have like some basic notes for myself. So let's try putting in that polymer orange in there. And I'm gonna just keep it fairly loose while I block everything out. So one thing I found that it's very tricky in this business is that let's say when you start off as a junior artist, you might not be working off your own designs from day one. You might be working off someone else's design. Like you might have a senior or an art director or whoever who would give you a sketch very much like that, and then they need you to turn it into a full-fledged design. And what a full-fledged design means is like it's a fully colored concept with turnarounds and everything like that. So that's something I think like a lot of us forget, like because if you really struggle to design your own stuff, like it's gonna be even harder to design someone else's stuff. So it's a very good practice actually to do one rough sketch, and then when you take over it, try not to just trace but really think about the design and how to actually make it come to life a little bit better. So in this case, like I have to repaint most of the stuff in a different perspective now, right? Because it's a new angle, and it's forcing me to really understand the design, because this is just a convenient side view sketch. So there are a lot of things that are actually obscured and not in perspective. But now I kind of need to solve them in my concept. So this arm part is very much like a fallout like piece of power armor metal. So the Fallout Power Armor, if you're not familiar with it, is a armored suit that I personally like how they design the support struts around the edges. So this is from a video game called Fallout, and if you look closely, I really like all of these little support struts, you know, the one on the sides here. It kind of makes the armor look like it has additional strength. So that's what I'm stealing from that, like little support struts there. So again, I'm gonna keep it very, very loose because this is a sketch of a sketch, like and I will photobash over this entire thing and then kind of flesh it out further, but I just want to get the volumes right. So this is supposed to be like a piping and everything. And here, extra atmospheric pressure suit material. Bring some of that orange back in. So this stage is meant to work fairly quickly because it's more of a brainstorming, and I'm trying to get like all of that small angles to be accurate, you know, like that little curve and sculpting of the shape to be correct. So not really interested in any big details yet. Sorry, small details yet. More focus on the big details. So it has that little stuff here, just stuff that I like to design. And the pants is actually, I planned it out that there's a rubber sleeve that goes around the knee pad. So this is all already stuff that I planned in my head. It's something that if you want to design a costume, you should be quite conscious about the layering of the costume, because if not, when it comes to painting it, you're going to get quite confused pretty easily. So it's a good idea to think about layers, how everything is stacked on top of each other. So there's a rubber, and then there's a few clasps that clasps the rubber down, and then this part here is another kind of like polymer, like that biker material. So you can see more and more like the original Sketchfab screenshot is kind of fading away, and that's good. But it has done its job. It has given me a very, very nice base to paint on. And I know that I'm not making any what do you call it, drawing mistakes, because this is coming from a pretty decent reference. So I want to get that silhouette of that nice fat calf, like, you know, like that Shinkawa, that fat Shinkawa legs, which I really like. And I love that, I don't know, that tactical sportswear look, which is just so badass in his designs. It kind of looks like the latest, if like Nike and some futuristic military had a baby, and then that would be the shoe, you know. So that's kind of like the vibe. Okay, so just kind of fleshing out all the other stuff. I kind of feel that there is a proportion problem somewhere. I haven't really, not entirely sure where it is yet, but it feels like that. Like I think I made a mistake somewhere. So, but I'm just gonna continue pressing on and finishing up to block out all of the elements first. And then what we're gonna do later is either bring it through a liquefy pass again and just kind of iron out some of this proportion issues. Let me just put this in. So it's 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3 here. I think this hood is also a little bit bigger, so let me just scale that up. And you got all this like junk, well, it's not junk, sorry, I mean it's like a design grabble. So I call it a design grabble or greeble, however you call it. Are you all familiar with the word greeble? Some of you are, some of you not. Okay, so greeble is a sorry, it's either greeble or kibble, like either one. I think kibble is like another, or it's a cat food, but okay, you know what, I think it is greeble. I hope I'm spelling it right. So greeble is a thing that it kind of started, in Star Wars, the first 4, 5, 6, where they would essentially have these giant ships, right? And they had a very tight deadline. You couldn't finish it. You couldn't make every single part in time, right? So what they would do is like they will buy a lot of model kits like tanks, cars, toys essentially that had nice small detail, and they would just build the big ship, but all of these small details are just like rubbish parts that they get from suspension, exhaust pipes of the toy, and just glue it on. And the way that they mix it was clever enough that it looks like, oh, it's all one single functioning design, right? And the phrase was called greeble, right? So here's another one where you essentially have a very big shape or a very big silhouette, and then a lot of junk in the middle that suggests micro detail and storytelling and things like that. And that's kind of like the concept of greebling. So like right now I'm focused on the big shapes, and then once I'm happy with my big shapes, I can add like small greebles like this. So all these little bits of things and patterns on the side. So greebling shouldn't be random, obviously. There should be some logic and order to it, because if you make it too random, it's gonna get like messy, stupidly messy, right? So you want to have some kind of logic, like a repeated form of greeble, and a bit of storytelling to suggest why the greeble is there in the first place. But that's the general idea. So that's why I say it's essentially junk, but it's well placed junk design, right? It's not necessary for every design. Like if you're designing like an Apple, the next Apple iPhone, like don't put greeble, right? That kind of a thing. But if you're designing like some hacker PC and you want to make it look extra grungy or whatever, then a greeble will be pretty awesome to add in. Okay, so last bit is like the helmet is a pretty important part of the design. It's actually something that I've been cooking up for a long time. So if you look at my old ArtStation work, I have this IP called Color and Chrome. I did about 3 or 4 paintings of it, and then I kind of put it to a side because I think the inspiration kind of stopped for a while. But let's just load that up. So the Color and Chrome IP essentially had these two characters, where this is a liquid metal floating head, and it could essentially take on any form, and that's kind of like the base idea. And I've always wanted to play with that because I'm a big fan of Terminator 2, Liquid Metal, T1000. I wanted to kind of take on my own approach to it. So my general knowledge is that my driver is not wearing a normal helmet. Like, she's actually wearing like a chrome liquid metal helmet that would just like that onto her head and go back in like that. So it's like a very convenient thing to have, and it'll be very cool and very quick. So I'm not going to even bother trying to paint that. I'm just going to look for a chrome sphere, and then that should get me. This should give me a really good base to start working on it. So let's look for something with some fair bit of reflections. The more reflections you have, the more chromy it looks. But not this one because it's a person. Maybe, I don't know. Like, let's just grab that. So chrome only looks like chrome when you have something to reflect on. So if you don't have anything to reflect, it unfortunately doesn't look like anything at all. So it's gonna be a little bit tricky for my gray background. So I'm just gonna put it in first, and then I would have to tweak it once I put this artwork into a proper environment so that the chrome is actually reflecting something. So this one is actually reflecting the table and the city, but I think it's generic enough. The gray value of the ground is kind of similar to the gray value here, so I think it should trick our monkey brains to believe that, you know, this is like pretty on point. So the design it's a generally smooth shape, like almost like a human helmet, but just a little bit of what do you call it, dips here and there. So for this, I am going to try and match back this silhouette as close as I can. So I'm going to liquefy this. So the good thing is, like, even if it's a little bit wobbly, it's actually correct. So I just need to make sure that I don't mess up that reflection, because that's the one that actually sells the fact that this is some kind of a chrome helmet. So liquefy is a pretty good tool for this because I can really make sure that everything is in line. But I need to make sure that the middle part, the nose bridge, actually is kind of coming down like a real helmet. So you kind of see I've already blocked out that similar highlight and horizon distortion in my sketch. So I already kind of have quite a solid plan. And one thing I wanted as well was like that sharp tail at the back to just kind of make it look a little bit more aerodynamic. So this is a start. I'm gonna make some paint adjustments on it. So this is like more just kind of like my personal, so now I'm actually painting, so I'm going into kind of a bit of a danger zone here. Okay, let's just put that in there. I kind of feel like there we go, because our scene is quite dark, so it shouldn't take on so much light. And I might pair this with another photo just to see if I can just make the reflections complex enough that we start to believe it. So I need something more generic now. But you can kind of see how how much I've slowed down, right? Like I've really now I'm more cautious. I'm not kind of just rushing through it because this is getting like it's a quite precise thing to get the chrome to work right. So I want to make sure I have the right references and the right percentage of distortion on it to get it correct. Oh, right. G.I. Joe, right? Oh, but it's not exactly chrome, but some of them are pretty decent. Oh, wow. Because this has the right percentage of complexity. Yeah, this is more like the feeling that I wanted. Yay, easy, job done, good. So, you know, like, I believe like one of the hardest things about being an artist is, or a designer, is not essentially how to draw and all those stuff. Like, maybe you might be struggling with that now. How do I paint this? How do I draw that? Oh, it's really hard. It takes a lot of time. But you give yourself a couple of years, you'll probably solve that, you know, pretty soon, because that arc is confirmed. If you paint 100 pictures, or you paint 1,000 pictures, the 1,001 piece is gonna look quite good, because naturally that's what happens. The hardest thing I believe as an artist is like figuring out what the hell you want to draw. Like, that is to me like the hardest one. Like, I spend more time thinking about my design than actually executing it. Like, I keep it in the back of my head. I think about it during dinner, and it's a constant like chatter in my brain when I watch a movie. It's like, oh wow, I kind of like that part of the design. I'm gonna save this for something someday, right? That kind of a thing. So that's why like a lot of like more senior designers are more excited about talking about design, or just maybe outside references. No one really is interested about the skill or technique anymore, because it becomes kind of irrelevant at that point. So I'm going to mix a few of them together, just kind of get like get more variety, more complexity, so it doesn't just look like a photo I liquefied. And I'm gonna blur this. Gosh, blur. I'm gonna go surface blur this, or Gaussian blur this as well. There we go. That's good. And I think I'm just going to test out a surface blur on this, because I think as much as I like that, it's a little bit too busy. In the final version, what I'll do is I'll just sculpt the helmet in ZBrush and put a chrome material, an actual chrome material, and then just render it, and it'll definitely give me a much more precise outcome. Yeah, I don't like that. Okay, you know what? Let's stop messing around with it and kind of keep it as this. All right, so we got our chrome head on. Okay, so now let's work on the on the proportions of the design, because I think a little bit is lost. And then after this, then we can start photo bashing and kind of cleaning it up. So let's line up these two designs a little bit better, and so that I'm going to just manually cut out some of these parts and just reshape them using the transform tool. I also feel like the character is a little bit like overposed at the moment. I just want like a pretty neutral stance. I think this arm is could be a little bit more prominent outwards. So she's quite like beefy as well, at least bone structure wise. She's very lean, but quite an impossible physique, but it's okay. I like that. Let's get some white in there. And she's kind of like sticking out her crotch just a little bit too much, so at this one I'm gonna just liquefy it. So I have a certain brand of like body language which I like. I say that because, you know, I like my characters to stand a certain way. So that's why I'm really messing around with my gesture at the moment. But you know, if this is something that you're not totally keen or interested to really dig into, then just stick to your 3D reference or pose reference that you have that you found. You don't have to go through this phase. But for me, just like the body language says a lot about the character, so I just want to kind of make sure I'm satisfied with it. Okay, that looks good. It's pretty close to my original design. Let's rasterize this. Like I said, the color is a bit of a mess at the moment, so that's something I'm going to work on now before I start photo bashing. I think there's just too much brown, so let me just try and turn this into something else. Kind of like that initial, like, you know, the biker black gray combo. Let's see how that works. The neck is actually not supposed to be skin colored like that, so it's actually because it's an atmospheric suit, so I don't want to suggest that this human skin can be exposed to it. And then some greeble here, there. Okay. So usually for color scheme, is good to bring in reference. So I can put this away first and let's look at our photo. I kind of like this one, and I think that's why like my color is leaning towards this. This is like a very old, I think it's a diving or atmospheric suit that was designed back in the day, and you had this very interesting olive material. So I think all of my ribbing and parts will be like something along the lines of that color. I also like that whole contrast, like when you put like, you know, very white colored armor, kind of like that very spacesuit looking thing. It has like a nice vibe to it as well, so I do want to keep that. And maybe here is something like this. This is gonna be white too. Let's crank up the orange on this part a little bit more. Okay, not bad for now. So this is what I will consider a sketch of a costume. And then what I'll do normally is at this level of finish, it's quite okay to send to a client to get some feedback, some design notes. And I will do like maybe 3 or 4 of this, you know, 3 different variants, and which I'm probably going to do now as well, just to show you like how. And I want to explore that as well. I think doing variants is a great way to test the power of your design, the longevity of your design. So this will be like what I call the main one, the master design, and then we'll try a few more where we purposely kind of go against our own design sensibilities and try out some different ideas. Ooh, I didn't save. Okay. So this is called Project Happy, and this is the Project Happy Rider. Okay, so base design is done. The hand is actually going to be, one hand is a robotic hand, and I am a massive fan of bionic hands, so I always love putting their hands into my work. So I'm just gonna again just put that in. So let's find one where it's like a pretty decent angle, similar to mine. I think I've told you before, right, about this company. Yeah, very, very cool. This is very nice too. It looks like a 3D printed, very roughly printed hand. But I love how like there's like a no nonsense design to it, right? But look at that joints though. Oof, beautiful. And not much luck on the different angles, so I might have to just use this and warp it. Like the little carbon fiber patterns on it. Usually what I'll do is I would just retain the majority of the architecture of the engineering of it, but what I'll do is I'll just tweak it. Because generally what I like with my robot hands is just a little bit more emphasis on the middle joints too, and I like when there is the same metal in the middle gaps, so that's just something I like, my preference. And I also kind of like to make it a little bit more designy and just have like some knuckle extensions. The logo is actually pretty cool. I like how it creates like a nice color contrast. So maybe this is like, you know, like they've become like the Apple computer of this generation, where they just make like really cheap and well, not cheap, like really accessible robot hands for everyday use. Normally I get rid of the branding, but I think in this case let's just have a bit of fun and just keep that in there. I think it's nice too. Okay, so normally with photos, they tend to lose quite a bit of the natural gesture, and also obviously the perspective is a bit screwed up, so it takes a little bit of finessing to kind of get it to at least sit better onto your design. This is like the difference between a photo bash and a good photo bash and a not so good photo bash. That you kind of need to take some time to actually work the picture in. Yeah, I don't want it to draw too much attention as well. It's just a hand. Let's improve on the silhouette, because I just realized that it's a little bit leaner in my sketch, but becoming very unreasonably chunky in my color version. also I wonder if her knees are a little bit too low. Let me just address that. Head might be a little bit too big as well for my liking. Sorry, kind of prefer the previous version, maybe. I think just the knees will do. I don't want to over tweak it. Again, maybe I'll iron out that problem in the 3D model. Let's just focus on the overall design first. Okay, so let's just get rid of some of our references for a moment. And let's just do like 2 more quick passes and try out some slightly different ideas. Mainly I just want to see if there's any potential for a slightly different color scheme. So I actually have like a rule in my design Bible that the colors are limited to yellow and red. Yes, yellow and red. But you know, whatever shade of yellow and red that I will go with, kind of a thing. And this is just like an internal decision based on the overall direction of the short film. So I'm not gonna try like blue or purple or things like that for the time being. It's actually more of a green than a yellow. So what I'm trying to explore is reversal. So if this part used to be light, let's make it darker. Let's invert the color scheme that we have so far. So just fooling around at the moment, no real plan. Just kind of like putting it there first and just kind of letting it sit. Just see like whether do I want to keep it or not. I kind of know like the design always will require some point of focus, which is the chrome head and the red shoulder pad. It is just a design motive that like Iron Man has the glowing chest piece. Like if you take it out, it's kind of like not Iron Man anymore. But you can have him any color you want, red, blue, black, white. But as long as you have the glowing chest, it's kind of very much symbolizes Iron Man already. So I just need something like that for my design. So I have two elements at the moment to help me with that. One is the chrome helmet. So the moment you see the chrome helmet, you'll know that it's for this character. And then the other one I think is that vibrant shoulder pad is also another aspect. One thing I'm interested to try out is like, what if both are the same kind of shoulder pads? See how that looks. I do like that a lot actually. So far it feels like it's sitting well. Yeah, but this is like the recipe for sequel design. If one is good, you add two. Two is better. And then the trilogy is you add three. Yeah, you know what? That's you know, kind of working out. I do have this vision where it's meant to be a little bit quirky, yeah, the design. So this is part of like my bigger art direction plan. It's not meant to be cool in a military sense. It is meant to be a little bit loud and a bit garish in a kind of like a cyberpunk setting, because that's where the film will take place anyway. Yeah, but guys, I think this is it. This is the one though. Feeling really good about it. I'm still gonna make another one just to kind of play around. And man, but this arm is killing me in terms of design. I think it looks like shit. So I feel like it's not gelling. So let me just kind of like give it another go. Like sometimes you have an idea and you think it might look good, but because we're relatively quite naive and stupid, so most of the time it doesn't look good. So you just gotta need to work on this a little bit more. So what does this current color scheme remind you of? Anything comes first thing into your head? KFC. Oh, KFC because of the bright red? Yeah. Pizza Hut, right? That's good. In fact, that's like the exact answer that I want to hear actually, which is good. Ha! Now you're getting close, yeah. I mean, the title is Project Happy, right? This is what happens when you have nothing to do in a flight. Yeah, but I want like a little like GPS thing on the thing, so to know where to go. So but yeah, like that is it's good. So this is kind of like generic sci-fi thing, which makes sense. It was a generic sci-fi thing, so the second one kind of has a little bit more storytelling going on. So I'm pretty happy with it. No pun intended. Okay, so for the sake of time, I think we're just going to stick to 2 versions, and then I'm going to start doing a detailed version of this using the textures. Just save this. I might have to like bring this onto a new canvas so that I think it's just good habit. Like whenever you're ready to move on to the next stage, create a new canvas, start fresh. Project happy. Just kind of give yourself a fresh start. And then also optimize your canvas again, optimize your layers. That way you are, okay, this is like, now you're shifting gears in your brain. Now you're not worried about all this design stuff already. Now you're gonna focus on rendering. So this one I will save, and then I'll close it. That phase of the design is done. This is also good because let's say your PSD gets corrupted, which it happens over time. You know, you have backups and things like that. And let's say if you ever want to walk through your client or director about your design process, you have all of the backup files. Because trust me, I've sat down with many artists, junior artists in my life, and then like, you know, I ask them, oh, so how do you get this design? Or can I see the previous version? They don't have it. Because they overwritten everything, and then they painted on top of everything. And it's like, oh, it's such a shame, because it would have been great to document that. Okay, so let's bring in some pictures. Might be some very good wrinkle textures on this guy, so I might want to keep that, but let's go part by part. Yeah, so first thing I need is that ribbing. So I could use this one. Quite interesting. Might have to get some higher res texture. Yeah, wrong keyword is actually a pressure suit, not atmospheric. My mistake. So just a good habit for if you want, just always photobash from a higher res source. I think it's just like if you can't find it, just try a little bit harder. It's important to get a very good photobash source before you start or anything. You really only need 1 or 2 pictures, and it's enough to build up your entire painting. And it's just a much more fun process when you have a good high res source. So I'm going to add some keyword like maybe a ribbed pressure suit, or maybe just I don't know whether a ribbed suit would give me anything. Yeah, no. Let's try Russian. Yeah, okay, this is quite good. Yeah, this is quite nice. So I have this one. This is not bad as well. Got some nice kind of lining there. One thing good about it is that once you actually find the picture, and then you can get the names from the resources, and then you can usually find more, right? So I remember actually I used this wind, they call it the Windeck pressure suit, and it's a very, very nicely designed suit. The color combination is actually very nice, silver and the navy blue. Very, very cool color scheme, and it's this very nice mix of metal joints fabric, which I do like, so I'm going to implement that into my design. So this is a learning process as well, yeah, like whenever you do research, the idea is that you're supposed to leverage of it over time. So each time you do a painting, you learn something new about technology, about a type of culture or history, and then you build up from that knowledge. So over time, if your memory is good, right, then when someone asks you for recommendations for a design, you can instantly drop like a name. Oh yeah, look at the Windeck pressure suit, right? Like it has some really cool lines. It's actually a much better way of looking at design rather than just saying like, oh, I think it's like the Star Wars thing or something like that, right? Because now you're actually looking at the source. Oh, there's a yellow version. And look at this awesome 3D model. I love the ribbing. That's the ribbing that I want, actually, that size. So whoever worked on this, Jesus did work on it, so thank you. Oh, strangely enough, I know this is a joke, but it's actually a very nice texture. It's a bit low res, but oh well. This is not bad, actually. Okay, so I think I have quite a number of pieces of texture that I can play with. This is still the perfect one. I try not to take too much from 3D models, but often enough I find myself, because they have the best resolution, what I would say is like, just please don't take the design. Like I'm taking something that's very generic, it's just a very high resolution rib. I'm probably not going to take anything else besides this. Maybe some of the wrinkles I spotted, which are quite nice. So just practice some kind of like common decency when you're doing photo bashing. If you really want to take a big chunk, then what you could do is also just credit the artist and even include the original stock photo. That way you're very transparent with what you use, and then it actually also, at least the artist that you're taking from gets something as well, because they'll be like, you know, your audience will be able to see like that person's work, and then it's a kind of like some sort of a win-win at that point. Okay, so that one photo I'm just gonna use a few times and gonna get like that shape that I want. And just clean up this silhouette a little bit because it's a little bit dodgy. Just gradually start to flesh out this design. Normally when I start photo bashing, I try my best to not paint anything in anymore, because like it actually messes up the painting both ways. Your painted parts will look too painterly and then the photo bash parts will look too photo bash. So I try to limit to one technique at a time. So when I'm really photo bashing, I would just stick to pictures, and if let's say I need to adjust the values or the lighting, this is how I would do it. So let's say I want to add this little ringlet on the forearm armor. I'll just make sure the size and position is correct, and maybe just extend whatever is missing. So color correct it. If I want to add like a brighter spot, I will actually use a lasso and a dodge instead, rather than actually painting it in. And if I want to do an overall darkening, I would just use the levels instead to darken the value. It will actually give me a more precise, a more accurate outcome than if I were to try and paint it by hand. So I really like this kind of like this aluminium strap, so I'm going to use it quite a few times, I think. I think it just looks really good. And if I want to do a cast shadow, I'll just use the lasso, drop it down like that, and shift F6 just to soften it a little bit. Just add a cast shadow like that. Okay, next up, let's start to maybe flesh out more of the fabric parts. Let's settle this guy here. What texture can I use for that? So do I want to use this guy? So what this is like a little puffy lining, and then inside here there's a cloth, and there's a few layers of cloth in there. So now I need to look at my texture references and see whether do I have anything of the sort, or do I need to get a new reference. Hopefully I don't, because I think it's going to take forever if I need to find every part. So this is where I need to think outside the box a little bit about where I'm getting my textures from, because I don't think I can ever Google this shape, right? It doesn't exist in real life. So I need to recreate it from a series of pictures instead. So let's see, I'm wondering if this guy is possible, because it does have this segment here, you know, with the zip, and the zip is kind of turning. And if I flip it, see how that works? So I could get an almost pretty decent estimate, pretty close to what I wanted. And it kind of has this quite nice detail to it as well. And because the photo itself was a fairly decent resolution, so this is actually another reason why, like, I highly encourage, you know, every texture that you put in to really make it pretty dense, because you might want to even just take a tiny part of it, not the entire photo itself. So you never know how far you warp or distort it, and you want to make sure that your photo has enough pixel density to allow you to manipulate it without getting too low res. So I'm combining these two pictures together to kind of form the construction of this part. Fix the shadows a little bit. So I want it to have like this little tiny wrinkles on it, you know, like those soft folded kind of tubular cloth. So I'm just gonna add this. Again, I'm not gonna paint this in, but I'm just gonna lasso and add it in like that. This texture is getting a little bit low res, so you kind of see how pixelated that's becoming. So let's grab a slightly higher res part, maybe around here. Just bring that back in. And this is a choice. You could leave some parts a little bit loose. It's quite common for us to do that as a concept artist, but I think that area is quite close to the focus, which is the face, and I want to just flesh it out a little bit better. Okay, let's do a bit of color matching, and then we can merge these two down. And then trim up this silhouette, and let's adjust the lighting here a little bit as well. 5 pixels this time because I want a wider spread. Okay, so it's coming along. For the sake of speed, I'm just gonna paint in some of the shadows. So usually what I tend to paint in is just some soft shadows to blend the pictures together. And I am going to repeat this along the other side. Just kind of fill up this space. So we kind of like have the padded neck guard in place. The helmet was already done, so it just needs a little bit of cleanup. And what I'll do is just make sure the reflections are sitting correctly, and that should be sufficient to sell the design. Just add a little bit of trim there. Let's flesh out the neck real quick. So let's see what textures we can use that match the perspective for the neck. I am wondering if, let's try this guy, see if it works. I chose it because it has this U shape, right? And because that U shape is a nice indication that the shape is, the camera angle is rotating downwards, like that. So it should give the illusion that it's like a neck. You kind of see how it's fitting into place, and then cut it out. Okay, coming along. I do like this little tubes that's in this 3D model. I want a very small version of it on my design as well, so I'm just going to grab this as a reference. I'll probably change it in a bit, but I'm just going to drop it there real quick and kind of do my own thing to it. Very subtle thing, but I just wanted something there on the neck. Okay, let's do the shoulder pads. Shoulder pads are a little bit more specific. It's going to be a multi-part process. I'm going to start with, I don't think I have a good material for it here. This is the inspiration for the design, but it's not a very good texture. Oh wait, you know what? Maybe I could use something. So one thing you need to understand when you're photo bashing is, like, some photos are good for inspiration for design and some are good for texture bashing. Sometimes it's like both, like they're good for both. So, but you have to be clever about how you choose that. So in this case, like, even though the design is inspired by the top part, I can't use this as a texture because the perspective is like way off. So what I need to do is kind of rebuild the surface in parts, right? So maybe I'll just rebuild the round shoulder shape using this texture because the noise and the information there is quite nice. And then I will manually add all that little portholes by hand on top of it. So I kind of like what this texture is suggesting with that little ridges and panel lines like that. This is kind of like more like a happy accident, which I think I will keep. I do have the option of like removing it. So, but what I want to do is this part shouldn't be that flush in deep. So it should be more, it shouldn't be that deep like that. So it's more like this, right? So this will be closer to my actual design. Let's colorize this. You know what? I think what I'll do is just set this to multiply. It's a little bit too big. Okay, so we have that part there. What I'm going to do is just I want to clean up this part and then let's get rid of that. Okay, so now let's start to put in this little circular details. So again, this photo is quite decent in resolution, so I can actually just make use of most of this without any issues. So mind you, this is a totally illogical design bit of detail. This is just something that I want. Yeah, it's kind of like spikes on an armor. Like, it's just, I think it will make it look nicer. So I'm going to place this fairly carefully, making sure that the perspective all lines up. That's kind of like the biggest challenge now, is just to make sure that I'm getting it to sit correctly in space, right? So it's a little bit tedious, but honestly it beats drawing it by hand and trying to project this nonsense. Cylinders are not fun to paint or draw or paint. They're fairly challenging to achieve, so I'm quite thankful that I have this. If I don't have this photo, what I probably would have done is maybe just grab like a sketchfab model of a cylinder and then just kind of rotate it around a few times and get a few of the angles. Because of all the layers I'm dropping in, I'm starting to feel a slowdown on my computer, so I'm gonna have to start merging some of this stuff soon. The layer count really affects the performance, especially when you're working at this large resolution. And the PC that I'm using right now isn't the strongest as well, so it's a little bit annoying. Anyway, so we can start merging this down. Some of these guys need to be tweaked a little bit, kind of get the angle right. Oh man, I had to do the other side. God damn, it's gonna take forever. Okay, so let's do a bit of color correction. I'm not sure if I want to leave it white. I kind of like it that way. Let's just see how it looks with like a different color. Yeah, pretty on point. Oh yeah, I think I'm gonna stick to the original plan. It was already very garish in terms of the design, so I don't think I want to add a contrasting color there. Okay, so now just adjust the lighting a little bit. Okay, move on to chest armor. I do like this photo quite a bit. There's some very interesting shapes going on, very nice form. So I'm gonna see how much I can take from this. I especially like that micro detail on the middle, that little ridge line. I think it'll create some nice lines for my photo design. So again, preserving the shape of my original sketch and making sure that the perspective of both photo and drawing lines up. And let's do a quick check. So this part is supposed to be red. So let's just match back that red. There's a particular section that is yellow. And I am gonna just hand paint that panel ridge just in support of this current design here. This little notch here, I'm gonna desaturate it because I think I like it to be a metal color instead. So I'm just gonna hand paint some of this finer details just because it's quicker than it'll be quicker than just kind of using the lasso. I'm gonna quickly block in some scratches as well, so it's just the color of the steel, so like gray silver, and then just gonna paint it in. So this is just kind of like a magic wand selection. So it's a fairly quick way to kind of get your scratches to kind of look somewhat decent. Feel like the perspective is a little bit off. So I'm doing a bit of housekeeping on the painting, just tying some of these photos together a little bit better by adding some softer shadows in between them. This will just kind of make the pieces sit together a little bit better. And I also forgot, like, you know, some, again, housekeeping, because you're just kind of cleaning up the picture. So a little bit of a soft drop shadow from these little tubes will be much better to make this thing sit. I rather just do this now, that way, you know, because it's fairly quick and I just want to get over with it. And just kind of fix some of the, because whenever we use a picture, the lighting is not perfect, right? Obviously, because it's from a totally different source, so it takes a little bit of finessing, and sometimes it involves paint to kind of get everything to sit together correctly. Okay, so every area that I've bashed so far is sitting together much better now, so I'm pretty happy with it. let's move on to the remaining parts, and let's see whether I'm purposely working quite slow. Actually, I'm really taking care for some of these parts, because all of the areas that I'm working on now are what I call just now like the iconic features. Like I cannot not have these parts to be correct, because they actually make up majority of the design. As I start to go lower and lower, I think I can start to take some discount in terms of the quality of it, because it's becoming like non-essential parts already. So for example, like I think this whole part here, what I can do is just get a picture of a jumpsuit. Sorry, maybe I should put overalls. Military. So I'm looking for a texture that I could fit here. That is what my brain is processing at the moment. I'm quite okay if it doesn't have the exact, what do you call it, form. But what I want is just the noise, so let's try with this one. This one looks to be more high res, so let's go with this instead. Excuse me. And let's just pop this in. Let's try and get like the lineup, get it lined up fairly close, and then we'll work on it from there. So what I really want is just that fabric noise that it gives me. And I'm probably gonna paint in that lines myself. So this is not supposed to be green, it's supposed to be something more neutral. And the original one had a bit of a crotch part as well. I'm going to use this guy. Yeah, I know I said I wasn't going to use this 3D model for, but that crotch is too good. It's just too good. So this is how you kind of create one single material from multiple sources. And we'll pair this up with a bit of liquify as well, so that even the textures are working the way we want them to. So it's kind of like a combination of all of these tools to get the photo to sit exactly where you want it to. And then the last resort for me is actually just to paint in some of these things, and I just try not to do too much of the hand painting thing. just because, you know, I really have a lot of respect for good painters. It's just something that I think it's a lot of people don't realize how difficult it is to paint something from scratch, and the amount of time and effort that it takes. So I'm not going to pretend that I can actually achieve that. So especially not in the time that we have for this kind of video game or movie productions, which is fairly short. So anytime that I can like save time but maintain accuracy with a photo, I will use a photo, and anytime that I feel confident that I can achieve it with a paintbrush, then I'll just paint it. Okay, so how many lines are there again? It's like quite a lot, so just gonna work these lines in manually. These lines I'm actually gonna hand paint in, but if you see me work, like I'm not drawing one straight line like that. I'm just kind of gradually working it in, because I want that complexity of like how a real fabric would have, like a real photo. And the lines, yeah, I'm drawing it in as well, because I'm never gonna get the exact photo. It's almost impossible. Okay, so just pretty simple stuff, but there is a lot of care into it, because I want to make sure that I get the angles of the wrinkles correct and things like that. Again, this is still a concept art, not an illustration, so I have some room to keep it a bit loose and rough. But yeah, not too bad. Right, so let's pop in some highlights here and there, because you don't want the ridges to just be flat. I actually want them to be have a little bit of dimension to it. And I think the original was a bit more light. Yeah, it was more light. Another thing I want to do is suggest a little bit of form. So I'm gonna, you know how like your abdomen has like a little bit of muscle pads to it, so I do wanna yeah, most of us don't have it. I mean, yeah, just this attractive video game people has it. So and Shift F6, increase the feather quite a bit, because I do want it to be quite soft. So essentially what I did is I selected all the top parts, so if I lighten it, it should give me some definition. See that? Like very high definition and a little bit. I just want a little bit there, and then the remaining one, I think I'll just kind of paint it from the top. So now it kind of feels like it has more 3D form to it, right? So again, step by step, right? Get the textures to work for you first, and then only you do all this other fancy stuff. This is actually an error from the photo, right? If you notice, this section here is actually not supposed to be there, but I really liked it because it kind of broke up the shape a little bit, and I'm going to turn it into some sort of like liquid tube thing. Because what I can do is I can grab maybe this guy and kind of plug it in there or something like that. I don't think I've shown this in this class before, but if you have like a tube like this, you can go for a puppet warp, and this one you can kind of just, you can add skeletons and then just kind of bend the tube or wire according to how you like it. So that is actually good for pipes and things like that, right? Did any of you know that one already? Sorry. It's an old tool though, like very fun. Great for, like, you know, tails or hair that you just want to shape a very particular way. Okay, coming along well. It's we're about an hour and a half in, I believe. We're hitting the 2-hour mark, so but you know, for like, and we started from a blank sketch, right, to reach up to this point. It's not too bad progress. That's why, like, a lot of these kind of concepts can be done. You can get a full packet ready by within 1 working day if you kind of know exactly what you're doing. So let's move down to like the armor parts. And I'm just gonna keep jamming on this one. Like, I don't really care too much about the accuracy of this particular section, but I just want the, like, my bare minimum is like the construction somewhat makes sense, and then I should be fine. I'm also only bashing from one photo source for this particular part, so that also helps a lot to maintain consistency. So that's another trick. Like, if you're building one part, try not to bash from too many photo sources. The more photo sources you bash from, the more work you need to put in to blend it together. But if it's just one photo source, it generally gels in quite nicely. Doesn't require that much work. So I have 2 photos just now, and they're relatively gelling together quite well because of that. I do want this part here to be opened up with the softer fabric, this rib fabric instead, so I'm just going to stamp tool that in. And just do a little bit of housekeeping again before I move on. Clean up these areas, and then I need to figure out what do I want this elbow pad to be made out of. Maybe something from here, but let's find a little bit more interesting of a silhouette. I don't know. I think you know what, just for the sake of time, simple black will do. Not everything needs to be fleshed out. Okay, forearm done. Kind of has like a little bit of a C3PO vibe to it. I'm good with that. Let's figure out a better joint for this. I want like a metal flap that kind of sticks out. I think that will look nicer. So what will be good for a metal flap here? Maybe I can get, again, this middle piece. Looks quite nice. Has the same material, same part. So let's kind of have that as a flap. Bit of a stormtrooper vibe, you know, here, which is good. I'm not even gonna do much lighting adjustment to it, I think, but maybe just darken this part up. Okay. You get rid of that bionic logo. It's actually conflicting with the color scheme, so sorry about that. Sorry, bionic. And let me just flesh out this arm here a little bit. One thing I knew I was going to change with this is that it actually has a very cool blue palette on the hand, and I want it to be like a little bit more warmer. So I'm just going to change the color temperature a little bit and just suggest some of that micro servo things. I'm not really going to put too much detail on that, but just enough to suggest like a robot hand. I'm fine. Okay, these part here, this little grabble bits, I could photobash it, but I think I'm just gonna render it. It's probably quicker. How are you all doing so far? Any questions? You want to stop me for a bit? Right,
at this point you need to present to everyone else.
Well, remember the very early sketch, right? Like I think that is already good to establish like maybe to start a conversation. But at this point, what my focus is now is to turn this into something more presentable, I guess is the key word. Okay, so every time you show your artwork is for a different use and for different people. If you show it to an art team, you can keep it fairly loose because an art team generally has an idea of how to fill up the empty spaces with their own minds, right? So if you know that you're going to show it to an art team, you can keep it fairly loose and just have a very, very fast turnaround. Like in a sense that you just produce it really quick and you send it out really quick. And what you want is like feedback for the design. But we've kind of already gone through that phase. So now what I'm thinking about is to show this to, let's say, like a producer or a person who is not trained in the arts. And I want to give them a picture that essentially is a recreation of how this suit will look like in real life, but in Photoshop. So I need to be as, in my mentality, to be as clear and real as possible, because it's going to be useful for everyone. Let's say if there's a fashion costume maker on board, they can already start to plan the budget for this outfit, which parts will be 3D printed, which parts will be fabricated by hand, where do they send the parts to paint, which parts do we cast in rubber latex versus cloth tailoring, right? That can only be solved when your rendering is a little bit more finished. So it's just kind of different uses. Or a 3D artist. A 3D artist will also need the rendering to be fairly finished so that there is no what do you call it, no gaps in their understanding of the design. So there is actually no like industry standard of like, oh, if it's this stage, then you need to do it this finish. If it's that stage, then you need to, there's no such thing. But everyone is thinking about how to make the other person's life easier. And that's kind of like the easiest way you can think about it. Like, if you want to make your 3D artist friend's life easier, then please like draw every angle, render every angle, do rough 3D models even for them. I've done that before when I have a design that I'm worried that he or she might not understand, then I'll just sculpt out a very rough version and use it as part of my concept, right? If you think on the behalf of the other artist or the other person behind the artwork, the other person that's going to look at it, it's very easy to make that decision. So this is why, like, if you even looking at some of maybe Eduardo Pena's work, right? A lot of his, you know Eduardo Pena? Yep, okay. A lot of his work is intentionally loose and it's more focused on atmosphere because he works with other VFX artists that are creative enough to fill up the gaps, but what they really need help on is like the atmosphere of the piece, right? So that is his main focus. I wouldn't, like, let's say, use one of his rough concepts and give it straight to a fashion, like a tailor, and just ask the tailor, okay, figure this out. Like, that wouldn't be very nice, right? But again, like, every artist has a different focus. It's just important to know what you want. My background is in 3D modeling. I did start off as a 3D artist. I worked in a 3D studio as a 3D artist, so I know how painful it is to work with a design that's not fleshed out entirely. And I personally am an artist that likes to flesh designs out like this. I like to figure out like the small little nuggets of nonsense everywhere, and I think it's fun. So it kind of really depends on what kind of designer that you choose to be. Some greeble here. I like how that kind of gives it just a little pop of yellow and a little bit more increased resolution. That was a good question, by the way. If you have any more, like, any other thoughts in your head about why do you ask that though? Well, because you asked me to ask a question, like. So, but I mean, what's on your mind? Like, why is there something? Is it something you're concerned about in your work or things like that?
Yeah.
Like, how finished is it?
Yeah.
Right.
To the presentation.
Yeah. You know, like, it's really hard to say. Like, I know a lot of artists who are successful, you know, in very loose work as well. Like I said, Eduardo is one of them, right? He's not concerned at all about like how detailed something is. So the way I see it is like every artwork needs to do something, like, right? Like, it needs to either tell you a story. If your focus is just to tell a story, then even color is not necessary anymore. You know, like, you can just have two stick men, you know, posing next, and it already would tell a story. It tells a fairly simple story, but it still tells a story. And so how do we define the finishing for that, right? So what I want this painting to achieve, at least for me, is number one, it needs to sell like a cool factor. It's very important that I have that cool factor. So the finishing is a big part of the cool factor, right? Like, it's also serving another purpose of practice. I do want to use this piece to improve on my rendering efficiency, so it is part of that as well. I am a learning artist, so I wanna give myself work that will maybe just let me level up a little bit or just practice a little bit, right? So that's also that. But when you talk about the working environment, then maybe you're just maybe concerned about who is going to receive this painting in the end. Sorry, that was a bit of a messy answer, but yeah. And man, I just realized something. I have a feeling when I put this up online, it just occurred to me now that I think it looks very close to a Zone of the Enders costume. Any of you follow Zone of Enders? If you look up Zone of Enders 2, the second one, I think it's called the Second Runner. One of the bad guys, I think, had a similar costume. You have to look at the pilots to kind of see it, but you guys, anyone found it? Yeah, I think it's a guy or something like. What do you think? How close does it look like, that one? Not really close? Oh, that's good. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's kind of like it's just not a good feeling, because you spend like a lot of time on something and then it looks like XYZ. Oh fuck yeah. But I really love Zone and this. If you get the art book, I think Kinokuniya has it, or Amazon definitely has it. Very very nice art book. A lot of very cool mecha designs, costume designs. It's also a Yoji Shinkawa product, so I'm a big fan of it. Very fun game as well. So Joshua, since we're talking about it, like, are you concerned about detail because you're worried that you take too long to finish it?
Actually, I'm asking this for everyone else.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, because I think that's like it's like the first worry, is it like it's true though, I mean, but the market kind of likes detailed stuff, so or actually no, I shouldn't say that. There's actually no proof for that. Like any form of artwork, right? You have the Sistine Chapel, which is like 200 characters in there, and then you have a piece of art that only has one person, like Mona Lisa. Like, how do you define which is a better painting, right? Like, you can't really do it. But what you need to understand is, like, there are times where you need a Mona Lisa and there are times where you need a Sistine Chapel. And both of them are useful as artworks. What is important is just you shouldn't avoid something definitely out of fear. One thing now, like, why I think detail is so scary is because you're always fighting for time. As a student, that's kind of like your life, right? Like you are chasing time every day, so the prospect of thinking about rendering something to a degree is quite daunting. But when you're in a working environment, there are people who are there to look after your time. They'll give you very set deadlines and things like that. Or when you're working on your own and you're kind of coming up with your own speed, I think it'll be a very different feeling. Like you will start to chase it. Like naturally, you'll start to chase like wanting to do more. Because finishing and detail is still, like, I think, like the best way to present life, and if you can present life and reality in your artwork, it's always a nice feeling. And I've just personally, I'm very addicted to that feeling. Like when I put all of the stuff in and I get really excited because it looks like a real movie, or it looks like a real person wearing the costume, and I just get, like, really happy about it, and I just keep adding more. And so I'm essentially just chasing that feeling, and I hope that the person who sees it will kind of feel what I'm feeling at the moment, that same geeky vibe, like, oh yeah, shit, this would be a pretty kick-ass thing to cosplay or whatever. So once your pursuit is like that, where you're just kind of constantly chasing this feeling, right, then maybe now it takes forever because you're relatively a slow painter. But just remember, like, speed by default should increase over time. Like, you would definitely increase. Like, there's a very high percentage of that will happen if you just keep working on it. And that's one thing. And the second thing is, like, if you're constantly chasing that, you will also be the kind of person that is always hungry for new techniques or new efficient ways to achieve what you want to achieve in a quicker time. And that's kind of like how I approached it. Oh man, I'm getting so lazy now. It's almost there. It's getting pretty close. You can see, like, kind of moving down to the feet now. So we're getting close to the end. And then after this, what I'll do is just go over the entire piece and then just kind of finalize all the key areas and flesh it out a little bit further. Like I said, I still plan to do a rough 3D sculpt of this, so this is not going to be the final concept anyway, but I just wanted to, like, just give this a little bit more of a decent render for now. I have this very bad habit of black lines in my work, which I want to get rid of. This is my amateurish painting coming out. So if you look at kind of very good artists' work, at least in my opinion, like, you cannot really, there's no lines, it's just like shapes and colors merging and kind of forming into shapes. So yeah, see how, like, that's instantly more realistic now because of that, getting rid of that stupid lines. Anyone else want to ask something? We can open up the topic to pretty broad as well, not even related to this painting, as in, like, work and all the other stuff.
John,
Yes, John.
if you want to get into character design,
Yes.
and we're trying to find a job, right? So should we, like, keep on doing character design and keep on pursuing this field of work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if, let's say, you're using character design, but let's say what we just change it to, if you have a very specific thing that you want to do, like character or environment or props, right? and in this case it's character. Should you just do that, right? The thing I've been giving advice to graduates more often is like, instead of you want to be ultra specific. If you're the kind of person that is specific, then be as specific as possible. So let's say if you want to go into character design, be very specific to down to what kind of character design, and try to link it to a product instead of a style. Like, think of it from a product perspective. So let's say you like, I don't know, what kind of character designs do you like JRPG or Western RPG, Witcher, whatever? Anything specific?
Well, any sort actually, like fantasy or even sci-fi, as long as I get to create characters.
Yeah, that's the thing. But you have to be specific, because like, when someone wants to hire you, right? Like, I can't just hire a general chef. I need to know exactly where I can put them in the kitchen. You know, like, so this is the big difference between your preference and what can you be useful in a working environment is a very different thing. Because what you might be useful for might not even be your personal preference, but it's just what you're useful for at the moment. So what I would say is that if you like fantasy design and sci-fi design, then you need to even specify that. Like, Overwatch is sci-fi, Mass Effect is sci-fi. Which one is it that you really want to get into, right? And decide from that perspective, and then create artworks and paintings that are specific to those products. Not fan art, very different thing, but like, let's say products that can fall under that category, so you still have a lot of room to play with, right? And if you want fantasy, the fantasy spectrum is even wider. Lord of the Rings, movie fantasy, Japanese fantasy, Korean style, Korean markets, China markets have a lot of fantasy as well, so which one is it, right? So I found out, like, students that there are two kinds of students get hired instantly when you graduate. You're going to see this pattern happening a couple of months from now. It's one kind of person is the one that the portfolio is just overall good because they're a good student, like, and you know these people, like, all of you know them, like, they're just like killing it every lesson. So studios are gonna hire them because they know, like, they're like the best in the crop. Then they'll figure out what to do with them later. You know, I mean, like, they just want to get them now because, like, fuck, I'm gonna get it because, like, you know, I know this person can be even better if I give them direction, because, like, whatever fundamentals is already strong and things like that. And it seems like they're good students because everything looks consistently good. It means they're hardworking as well. Because guess what? Every company in Malaysia knows what you all go through in the school, because most of the artists there and even the founders of the companies, like myself, are from TOA. So when I see a student portfolio that is like very complete, I'll be like, oh wow, like you not only did you survive, but you did well, right? So I know I can push you to a certain degree in my studio environment, and you'll be fine. So that's the first kind. Usually 3 to 5% of every batch you will have a person like that, boy, girl, whatever, right? The remainder, the second kind of person to get hired is the person that has a very, very targeted portfolio. Like, they realize that they're not good at every subject. They're not good at map painting. They're not good at After Effects. They suck at storyboarding, you know, that kind of a stuff. But they really like a certain thing. I don't know what it is, right? Maybe they like you said, character work, and they put extra effort on the character work. They have a lot of personal character work designs, and they clearly have a passion for the like how to put character work use, you know, like in the sense of a product. So these two kind of people will get hired instantly. So first order of the day is to figure out where you sit. Are you person number 1 or person number 2? Very likely you're person number 2, sadly. Yeah, I mean, that's life. If you're not even if you're person number 1, which is the naturally talented and good, you might not be that person tomorrow. It's just right now, right? So that's why I say, like, the best advice I can think of is just try to come up with some kind of targeted portfolio. Like, it is good, and it really can be anything. You'll be surprised how small something can be. Like, I literally got hired for my sketchbook. I kid you not. Like, my boss, or my at the time boss, looked at it because I did my fancy demo reel. I put all the music. I took like 3 days to choose a song and all kind of stupid nonsense. And then you know, it's shit because I'm a fresh graduate. I have like what maximum accumulative like 90 days worth of 3D experience, you know, accumulatively, you know, even though we study for 3 years, but how many days exactly do you dedicate to one particular subject, right? Like, it's gonna be roughly like 90 days at most. So don't feel bad if you're lousy. I mean, you only worked on it for about 3 months most of the time, right? So you're not gonna get a job for that. But my sketchbook was something very personal to me. I threw in a lot of my ideas, a lot of things that I wanted to create, and it ranged from desk lamps to toys to environments to design. So I believe, like, when my boss at the time saw it, and he's like, right, so he saw like a person that obviously needs more time to work on my craft, my skill, but had some good thinking process, you know, in terms of what design was. So I remember very clearly because after I showed everything, and you know, bosses have great poker faces. Like, it's their job. Like, they don't. It takes them like 10 seconds to look through your portfolio that you worked on for like 3 years. It's very upsetting. Like. But you know, then again, like, it's their job to review it fast anyway. So it's nothing personal. It's just that's how it is, right? And then he asked me, like, do I have a sketchbook or something? Like, and then I was like, yeah, I do. And I was lucky because I carry my sketchbook around everywhere at the time, especially because I like to draw when I wait. And I was lucky to have it there. And then he saw it, and then it's like, oh yeah. Actually, your designs look better than your shitty 3D work. He didn't say that a lot, but like if my 3D work was good, he would have hired me. You know what I mean? So obviously, the 3D work was bad, right? So he kind of counter proposed, like, hey, why don't you come in as a concept artist? We could use a designer, and you know, like, can you do all of this in color, that kind of thing? And I was like, yeah, for sure. I couldn't. Yeah, but I was like, yeah. Yeah, say yes first, and you figure it out later. Dude, like, my first year was nightmarish. Like, I worked from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day, and then it was just like, because it was a do or die situation, like. And you know, the pressure is very different because now, like, I have people waiting for my designs, like people in the company because they need to start 3D modeling it, and people overseas because they need to approve it, which is the clients. And it kind of boils down to the line of not submitting it next week, not even submitting it like the next day. It's kind of like within the day, right? From 0 to something within the day. And I was a person that, you know, I painted for fun, right? Like most of us started out in school, we just kind of paint for fun. But now I was essentially taking someone's money and then turning it into a painting that was useful, right? It was a very, very tough period. Yeah, I'm very proud of that time because no joke, it was rough. Like I thought about like I was gonna get fired every day. Like pretty sure I was gonna get fired. Oh, it's Tuesday. Pretty sure I'm gonna get fired today. Like, anytime my boss would come and say hi, like, oh, okay, this is it. You're gonna get fired. Yeah. But that kind of really, but you know the story. I became art director in the end, so it's funny. But I guess they must be like, man, this guy, you can get this guy to do some crazy shit for you. Like, I guess the point is if I had known that my core strength was sketching and design, if I was a little bit of a smarter person or someone told me ahead of time, I would have put more effort into selling myself as that aspect instead. Like I would come in and say like, hey, like I'm not a strong rendering artist, it's not my focus, but here's like 6 volumes of my sketchbooks and all of my ideas, and I produce them quick and I produce them efficiently, and maybe it might be useful for your organization. And if you join a company that is focused on ideas and IP development, they would love to have you on board, right? Because you'll be so useful. So that's kind of like the moral of that little story, I guess. Like like that's why I think like you should really figure out like what's your core. If you don't have the luxury of figuring out your core, which most of us do, right? Most of us don't know what our strength is. Then stick with the program, stick with what the school is already teaching you, and try to at least learn something from it. You're not very likely there's going to be a downtime after you graduate anyway, like 1 to 2 months, maybe longer, and you should use that time to rebuild your portfolio the way that you think will be good and that you think will be useful, and then you go back out shopping for employers again, right? And that actually makes more sense, especially today, because today there are a little bit more companies out there than when I started, right? So there are a lot more graduates as well, so that's the other thing, but there are a little bit more options these days. The industry also is not limited to a shop anymore or a studio. It's limited to your computer and the internet that you have, so you still have a lot of options. So you can almost say like there's no such thing as too niche of a market these days. Like sincerely, there's no such thing as too niche. You can really go for something very, very unique and still have a market kind of ready to give you money or success or recognition. So, John, where are you from again?
Mauritius.
How many Mauritius concept artists do you know?
I just heard that there's 2 working in movie stuff in Singapore.
Nice, nice.
But I don't know many of them. I don't even hear about them, so there's a few illustrators like concept artists, just comic book artists.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I see. It'll probably be like well, especially like you could call that like an opportunity for an emerging market, right? Like yeah.
So that I'd like to get more experience before I maybe go back to my country and try something new.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, like I said as well, especially when you don't have anyone like a known name there currently as well. Like it's it could very well be the first. I'm sure there's some abroad, but yeah, not on the island itself. Right? So that is what I would call a lazy son of a bitch method, but it works. And later I can do a more, I'll come up with a better like breakdown of that, you know, eventually. Okay, so the other thing I guess I want to talk about getting work is like try to do stuff that no one wants to do. I mean, if it really like, because I don't know what's your financial situation for each of you. Maybe some of you might need to start getting income almost immediately, based, you know, because of your family or whatever. And you really need a good position. So try to do stuff that no one wants to do. Something that I think a lot of artists try to avoid is like model sheets, turnarounds, back views, all that kind of stuff. Environment props, you know, like really good ones. Like you spend more time on your props than your environment props than your characters, for example. Essentially, like you're offering a service that other artists doesn't want to take, so you end up kind of automatically being more attractive as a hiree in that sense. Because when I was still at Lemon Sky, I did meet a lot of candidates that wanted to do all of the cool stuff, but often enough when a working environment is like any other working environment, it's like 90% is just cleaning stuff up or doing very menial tasks, essentially tasks that kind of help the engine go forward a bit better. All that whole creative part, unless you join a developer, is only like 20-30% of it, right? So if you can kind of present yourself as an artist that just really wants to get some solid work done, you'll be very attractive to employers. So what about further studies? Any one of you planning to go overseas to study? Is that something that is on your table at the moment?
A bit fed up right now.
Sorry?
A bit fed up right now. Need a break. Yes.
You mean like tired of life kind of a thing? Sorry?
You could say that. Just need a few days break. That's it.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I hear you. Like don't talk to me about the future right now, kind of a thing. Yeah, yeah, something like that. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. I started work immediately after I delivered my final project, because essentially I was hired by my lecturer, because my lecturer was was a guest lecturer like myself now, and then he ran a company which was at the time not Lemon Sky yet, but it became Lemon Sky. And then the moment I graduated, yeah, and I worked there for 7 years, so like zero break. Kind of wish I took a holiday. Yeah, I think it's very good. Like it, but yeah, at the time I was a very aggressively ambitious individual. I still am to a degree. But yeah, I saw some friends who went overseas and kind of got to experience new things. I think it improved their designs as well, which is something that I think was quite nice. But yeah, break is very good. Just make sure you have a plan for your break as well. Don't just break to break. But like, even if you want to play games, like set the time for like good games. You know what I mean? Like at least get the reviews going, like all the video game of the year winners, and then just set time to play those games. At least get pretty inspired. Because what I'm worried about sometimes when people say they want to take a break means they lie down on Facebook for like 3 months. You know what I mean? Like that's like, oh boy, you're gonna come out pretty depressed that point. Oh, and you know, I still gotta do the back view for this, you know, so that's man. So that's kind of like why I like 3D, because some of these things, like, it's much easier to solve with sculpting rather than painting it. But you know, I plan to put this in like an art book at some point and everything, so I will still paint it out, and again, it's good habit. So there's this very interesting article. Do you know how lobsters grow? Right, because their shells are hard, right? Like, so how does a lobster grow, right? So what happens to a lobster when it's time to grow is like, essentially the body, the inside of the body is like, it gets bigger and bigger, but the shell is the same size. So it gets this intense pressure in its body, right? And this is like a trigger that tells it, okay, it's time to grow. And so what happens is like the lobster would exit its shell, and its body is like, oh, weak and shit because it doesn't have a shell. It'll find a very dark place to do this, so that it doesn't die. So it'll exit its shell, find a dark place, and then slowly like become bigger, and then the new shell will harden around the new body, and then they throw away the old shell. And the reason why I'm saying this is because, like, the lobster's body receives a lot of stress. So what the lobster does is find a dark place and a safe place to de-shell, and then come up with a new, better body. A lot of times in life it's very similar. You need the stress to give you that pressure, so it teaches you that your current shell is insufficient, right? Because you feel stress, and then so it means that it's good to put yourself in a stressful situation so that you learn to scale up your body. And then every now and then you need to realize that you need to go to a dark place, which is like your break that you're talking about. Get out from your shell, be pretty vulnerable, but you also need to kind of like make sure that you're going to get into a new shell, a new better shell, and then you start the whole process again. So why I'm telling this story is because sometimes when people talk about stress, it feels like the first inclination is to avoid it. Like you might hear this from some people, like, hey, it's like you shouldn't be so stressed out. I think that's maybe not so good of an advice, because if let's say we all tell lobsters not to get stressed out, they wouldn't change shells. You know what I mean? All the lobsters be just kind of like the same size, like small weak lobsters, and then no one will eat them. But I don't know why. I don't know why they will want that, but it's good for us anyway. Anyway, a big lobster is useful for the lobster as well, because it means they can get more territory, whatever. Yeah. But the point I'm making is that be very careful of avoiding stress. Just understand that it's just a force, like a flu that you have to deal with. But after you're done with the flu, you should get stronger. But it's a very lousy place to be if you don't want to, like, let's say your whole life you're just avoiding the flu. Kind of good luck with that. And you miss out like all the cool things that come with cold stuff, right? So the first time I heard that story, I was like, oh, that's really good, because it justifies the need to work harder and just kind of to put yourself in a little bit more stressful situations, which is good. But it also gives you some allowance, that it allows you to take a break, just as long as you understand that that break is to, I'm building a new shell. Like you can tell that to your parents, like, just give me some time. Yeah, I'm gonna become a stronger lobster. Yeah. Then they'll really give you space, because oh my god, my son is insane. Lost his freaking mind. Yeah, but I like to, I more and more I'm trying to bring up more of these stories, because I've been listening to more evolutionary biologists, I'm listening to more psychologists talk, and I'm very, like, I found out like what lacked in my education as I was growing up was the psychology of being an artist. It was something that was left out. A lot of my lecturers were rightfully so drilling me on quality and working hard and getting things to look correct, that kind of stuff. But I think what was really left out in my education was how my brain would work, how do I cope with stress in the long term, because I want to do this for like the next 30-40 years, right? Like this is a lifetime career for me. How do I maintain that? Like, because I can't just like work to death and then just like, oh, bye-bye, right? Like, and I see people solve this in different ways, right? Like some people become very angry or a little bit, what do you call it, nihilistic about things. Nihilistic in the sense like, whatever, clients are stupid, companies are stupid, everything's stupid, I'm just here to get money. Like, it's not a great way to live, right? It's not a great way to get money as well, because clients will see that like, you're just kind of like, you're not into it, right? And then you have some people who are just generally positive, like everything is can good, And I don't think that's a reasonable approach as well, because unless you're just wired that way, don't get me wrong, some people are just great, like they're just born positive. Good for them, you know, like I would say I went through all of the phases. I was extremely naive and optimistic as a young artist. I became extremely angry and nihilistic as an older artist. And then kind of now I've been transitioning as more I understand how the brain worked into, I don't know what this is, but I'm just seeing like a bigger picture in all of it. And I'm just surprised that people talk about this for a lot of other topics of work. You know, like running a business, people talk about this a lot, but this is not commonly explored on from an artist perspective. So that's why I'm kind of bringing this topic up to you today, because it's very, very dangerous to fall into that nihilistic trap where you just are going with the motions and you don't really care whether the outcome is okay or not okay, and you just want to just get things over and done with. It's very dangerous in the long term. It's useful to get over a small problem, but very risky in the long term. So how many of you like to compare yourself to other people? Other artists, or just put up your hands so like we have this little sharing moment. Open up your hearts. Yes, it's quite a bit. I do too. I'm a chronic comparer, if that's the word, to the point where I fall into like deep depressions. Like I will load up ArtStation and it's like, like I just want to like stop working because it's just so. Or like Facebook, I get triggered on Facebook, I get triggered on ArtStation. And it's real, no, it's like a real pain. Like it is funny, but it's like, you know, this is my way of earning a living, right? I need to be on top of this when I have a family, when I need to look after other people. So like every year my risk is higher, right? It's not just a personal endeavor now, it's I have responsibilities as well. So I was listening to this evolutionary biologist talk about how humans evolve the need to compare and the need to compete. And you should listen to this story because it's very interesting. So why did humans, like as we evolve from simple humans to like modern city people, to have the need to compare? So one of the theories was that, let's give an example of two farmers, right? You have farmer A and farmer B. So farmer lives on one patch and your neighbor is farmer B. So you're farmer A and your neighbor is farmer B, right? So by the end of the season, you know, you guys both start farming your farm. You're planting like the same plants and you're planting the same fruits, whatever, same size of land, same country even, right? But by the end of the season, farmer B, your neighbor's farm, is like way better. His plants are greener, there's like more produce, there's more fruits, the fruits are sweeter, so in the end like he makes more money, sells more fruits, and then everything's like gets better and better. And then your farm is like shit, right? Your plants are like a bit yellow and small and whatever, your farm is shit, right? So what do? Right? Well, you can essentially walk over and you ask that guy, and if your neighbor is nice, he'll tell you, oh yeah, you know, like I water them every 5 hours, you know, like he's fucking insane, you know, that kind of a thing. Like he does something really crazy, you know, like I'm using, like, you know, I see, actually secretly I have this cow shit mix that I mix with my own shit, and then it's just a better soil. You know, something that you don't know, right? And now you're like, oh wow, okay, so then you try it, right? And then now your farm is looking good. And then sure enough, farmer C, who is your neighbor on the other side, will be like, hey, how come your farm, like how come both your farms are so good? And then you teach that person, and then maybe farmer A comes up with another solution to make it better because farmer A is a pioneer. And now like all three of you like are good. Okay, so that's why we evolved this. That's why the human race got so successful as a race. We are able to compare, we feel jealousy, and then we want to learn and improve. That is our power, right? So fast forward 500 years. We don't farm anymore. But we still have farms though. We still have emotional farms. Now the problem is, like when you look at farmer B, you can't look at it directly. You look at it through your phone or through ArtStation, right? And naturally, farmers B's farm is like fucking good, right? And not only that, farmer B is like 10 years old or something, like shit, like young and good. And this like it is gonna make you, because now your instinct is to try and understand, right? But number one, like it's not fair for you to compare, because maybe the farmer B in this modern day world is like in Japan, where the education is different, the land is different, the inspirations are different, the influence is different. Maybe your farmer B is also came from a very rich family, so every day all the farmer B thought about was just farming, even though it didn't have to really make anything, right? It was just being carefree, and that carefreeness allowed that farmer to succeed. So there's so many variables now that if you were to just blindly compare, it would be a very unfair way to compare your work. Even within the classmates that you have now, all of you are farmers at the moment. It would be a little bit unfair for you to compare each of your progress to one another, even though you're from the same class. Because right now it's a much different scenario. Like the only thing I can think of is, unless both of you were identical twins, then maybe you would have some justification to compare, right? But you're not. So this is very important to kind of synthesize when you look at yourself as an artist, that you have to be clever about how you do it. So the reason why I'm telling this story is for two reasons. Like first is like, I'm not saying comparing is bad. Comparing is very useful, and it's a part of how we improve as a human. But the second important thing is that you have to know who to compare to and what aspects specifically do you want to compare with. And that's about it. You can't compare overall. You can't say this person is better than me overall or something like that. You can't even say this person's art is better than me. You have to be very specific. You have to be specific in saying like, oh, I really like this person's colors. I want to compare my colors to this person's colors so that I can get better at colors. Now you've changed the dynamic to something that's beneficial for you. So the only way you can do this is to first figure out what the hell you want to do, right? You have to figure out what the hell do you want to be good at. Because if you don't know what you want to be good at, then what are you going to start comparing with? So I noticed like the best solution for people that are depressed who always compare themselves is to not say like you shouldn't be depressed, but it's more like if you just ask them, actually, what do you really want in your life? Like most of them struggle to answer because they never really thought about it, right? Why are you upset with an artist like Ranja, for example, or something? When do you want to be Ranja? Like it's like not really, actually. It's like, but I like his paintings, and it's like, okay, which part do you like in the painting then? Oh, I like the colors. Well, then figure out the color part. Not that bad to figure out just one aspect, right? You can spend 2 years figuring out the color part. Now it gives you something to do, right? Because now you have like, oh yeah, like, you know, and at some point you're gonna figure out as well, like, oh yeah, you know what, like I don't really like Ranja's work that much anyway. because I actually like the color part, and I found out through my study and my research that other artists do colors even better, right? Because Ronja is just being Ronja, right? Craig Mullins is just being Craig Mullins, right? And the other thing is like you can start comparing with yourself yesterday. That's the easiest way, right? I know it sounds tacky, it sounds like very like Asia Works bullshit, like very hippie nonsense, but what do you call it? Yeah, compare with yourself yesterday. Are you a better artist than you were yesterday or not? Like, why? Which part improved? Which part is not improving? Because if you do that at a high enough frequency, I guarantee you would beat every known famous artist on the planet today, right? Because you're working on a level of self-improvement that is highly effective. So that's why like focus on yourself is a little bit better, and you should feel less stress and depression as well when you start to think that way. And usually successful students or successful people kind of have this mentality where they're more concerned about their personal standards of quality than the outside standards of quality. And that's when you get the Yoji Shinkawas and the Hideo Kojimas and all of these other artists that have graced us in time. Alright, so this is that little lecture on what do you call it? Farmer. It's a little farmer story. So let that sit in your mind for a little bit and kind of start to simmer. Yeah, I'm sorry, like this painting is taking forever, but I kind of like I'm quite committed to it already at the moment, and it's kind of reaching the apex point where it's almost done. Just one more hour kind of a thing. I'm sure you've all kind of gone through that phase, yeah. This helmet is way too big. Is that too obvious? I think you won't notice it in the first glance. So yeah, you guys are not a fair audience because you kind of already guessed it. But I'm thinking if you see it the first time, it just might look like one of those generic sci-fi patterns that you see on the body. So I think it might trick some people. And I have big plans for this, by the way, like, big budget, like, and then kind of build up a hype. I have this imagination, like this dream where, like, Hollywood executives would get excited about it. It's like, oh my God, this is like the best thing ever. And then like James Cameron is gonna be, hey Gerald, like, man, like, would it be possible if I direct this? I mean, do you mind? And I'm like, yeah. But it has to be like 400 million USD budget at least, right? Because the visuals that I'm going for, my vision, and it's just a freaking. There's like a joke, like in the end, it's just like such a stupid joke. Like it was a waste of everyone's time. I'm gonna change this to black. So it felt like it was a little bit not aggressive enough. Kind of feel like I'm giving away just a little bit too much. Yeah, and a little bit of like glowing stuff always helps. And break up the values a little bit. But it's coming along. Like my workflow is fairly straightforward. Like I'll just keep whacking this for another like 2 more hours, and then it'll be done. As you can see, like the lighting is fairly, I think this is the only area that you have some indication of light, right, with the abs and the crotch. And I might go into some of these parts to enhance the lighting a little bit, but usually for a costume design, I kind of like to keep it very studio centric, evenly lit, just because again it's more useful for everyone on board. And then what I like to do is, if I want to turn this into an illustration, but more for the mood, I would resculpt this into 3D. That way I can bring in a 3D package to get more accurate lighting, and then put it in a proper scene. And that's for 2 reasons actually. So the first reason is because I don't trust my lighting requirements as an art director is higher than my abilities as an artist. Let's just put it that way. So I need to use tools to help me not feel like I want to kill myself when I paint something, right? Because and again, it's not my focus. Like I take pride in my art direction and my management and things like that. I don't really take pride in my lighting or art skill. And what I want to do most in my career is just to work with a lot of people and come up with some pretty fun designs. I'm not trying to achieve any special what do you call it, art trophy, for example. Yeah. So I'm quite open-minded with using as much tools as I can. So I just want to get like that little reflection to look right on the arm, shoulders. So I'm just gonna reverse this and it's too much. Yeah, just a little bit of like realism. It's just a nice little extra detail. And it's what will happen in real life anyway, so it makes sense. Okay, but as I'm moving on to like the final balancing of this, anyone want to ask me anything or any questions about the design of the painting or the workflow, like technical stuff? No, yes, it's all right. Don't feel self-conscious about it. It's okay. Yeah. But this is very fun. I'm glad I got to flesh out this design in class for you. Again, this is like an IP of mine, so it's always fun to work on your IPs. I found like that was working on an IP was something that really saved me as an artist. There were times where just I was not in good places, you know, like personal problems, career problems, things like that, and having like my own I had to have like really heavy sit downs to figure out like why the hell did I even do art in the first place, and one of those kind of like artist midlife crisis you could call it, right? And working on my IP was kind of like the ones that really helped me kind of re-jumpstart my passion and love for art in a very good way. Teaching as well, actually, working with all of you, with students, and especially like hearing some of your crazy ideas and your seeing your lack of respect for time and deadlines, and kind of really opened me up to a new perspective. Okay, last but not least. Oh, you know what? I have the perfect reference for this. I think I've told you before, but I save a lot of Hot Toys photos because they're fairly high res, and they have a lot of like this kind of nice clutter and good, you know, photorealistic detail, which is like very, very useful for me to bash in. And Deadpool also has red shoes, so it's actually kind of perfect. But I just need to kind of modify it so it matches my design aesthetic. So I can't just slap it in there. I need to do some work to it as well. Yeah, the boot design is terrible. But I'm kind of losing a little bit of steam, so I'm just gonna finish it up in a way that at least it's not too rough. And I think what I plan to do is just bring this back home like I normally do to my studio, and then just flesh it out all the way back in that environment. You know, I take some time off and just refresh the eyes a little bit, have another perspective of it. So let's clean up silhouette. Really don't like that feet. It's like a perspective is just all off. Really hate drawing feet because purely because I'm just don't have enough experience in it. That's why it always looks a little bit off in my work. It's funny, like when I sketch it, I'm perfectly comfortable, but when I paint feet, it's just something about it. I just don't like the way it looks. I want to bring back some of that, my Shinkawa fat thighs. Really like that. The Yoji Shinkawa look. Alright. Okay, let's prepare a little presentation deck. Okay, so we took from obviously the sketch to a rough color. Remember, we did two options for that, and you can kind of see like the rough color to the final is just a resolution update, but with some small tweaks in the design as I went along with it. This is important because like from here to here, especially if you're working with a client, try not to stray too far unless someone gives you actual feedback for it, right? Because it's kind of like sometimes when I work with junior artists, like the sketch is one thing and then the final product is another, and it's a little bit frustrating to direct because it's kind of like you go to a restaurant and you order spaghetti and then you get a pizza. Like, what are you trying to do? Like, and then it's like, oh, it's just food. Like, no, it's not, that's not it. Like, it's a very good pizza, but we are ordering a spaghetti, you know what I mean? So it's the same thing. That one requires actually quite a bit of discipline to stick through it. my advice is like, if you insist on doing a pizza even though your client orders spaghetti, then you submit two. And you say, this is your spaghetti, sir, but the pizza is free on the house. You know what I mean? And then do that long enough, and if you really believe in your pizza, then maybe you will turn it into a pizza parlor, right? But that's kind of like the logic. So that's kind of how you can shape your career if you want to. So anyway, I don't know why that kind of segued to something else, but anyway. So the point is, like, it is possible. Like, so that was about a long one. It's about 3 hours, right? So, but you can kind of take it to a full. I would consider this a fully finished concept, with the exception to the boots. I will work on the boots a little bit more, and the resolution is not bad. It's pretty tight. I need some better photos for some of the parts here to get that crispy resolution that I want. But it's coming along quite nice. And then it's still a pretty decent concept. So I guess like my main message is like, if you have a clear idea what you want to do, on top of that you have a clear list of reference that you are working from of, and you are smart about how you spend your time, when you should spend your time, you know, because when we're doing the rough we didn't spend too long, we're just gonna focus on the big shapes and everything. Then when it came to render, you can just fully 100% focus on render. Honestly, when you have a very focused mindset for every phase, your work should move quite fast. Usually your work starts to slow down is when you are unsure about what you're doing at the moment. That's usually the danger zone, because that's when you slow down, right? So I like to believe in that. Solve the small problems, but solve it fast. Just break everything down to very small problem and just solve it quickly. If you have a big problem, then put it aside first and we'll figure it out later. Because most likely your painting is, maybe there's 2 big problems and there's 8 small problems. Solve the small 8 ones first. You know, and you should know what those are. By the time you have 8 small problems solved, even if you really can't solve the 2 bigger problems, that's when you call for help through a lecturer or through a classmate. Like, how do I solve that? Right, but at least you have most of it done. Like my design now is, you know, there are still some issues. I actually forgot this thing. That's actually quite an important thing I need to add on, and there's still a lot of work in here, but it's kind of like I like, it's already, the 8 problems has already been solved. There's 2 more that I need to work on it a bit more on my own time, but that's kind of like it. So, but if let's say I were to just keep going back and forth, I haven't solved that problem yet, so I'm going to do other things, like that, you probably won't see this painting ever finished, right? And that's kind of like the real difference in the working world. In the working world, because the time is so short, sometimes even when the client says like, hey Gerald, you need to fix like 20 problems, you have to be clear, like, alright, like, you're giving me only enough time to fix 10 problems. Here's what I'll fix, the 10 best problems I can fix within that time. That's what we call negotiation, right? That's a reasonable thing. People won't attack you for it. They won't destroy you, or you're bad. They won't say that. It's a smart thing to say, right? So if you're the kind of person that is kind of like very perfectionist, it's going to be quite tough to work in a working environment, because a lot of it is changing fast, and a lot of it is about being very flexible about how you work.